close to you, even though we're seeing each other over the screen. I'm going to go through this, and like Michael said, if you have questions along the way, just holler. Oh, shoot, how do I go to the next slide? There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to start and give you a little background about myself. I went to Illinois State University, and I did not graduate in systems or programming, but I promise I still work in it. I graduated with a degree in communications and marketing back in 1999, so a little over 20 years ago. While I was at college, I had some really great experiences working at the campus newspaper. This was a long time ago when we still would print out ads and glue them to the format of the paper. So anyway, that just having that kind of working in a student business run environment, I think was really great experience and something I would highly recommend if that's available. I also worked at our computer lab and helped staff set up their class web pages. This was just at the very beginning of when professors were starting to think, oh, I could have a web page. How would I do that? And so I helped with that. In terms of my career, I work for a company called R.R. Donnelley, also called RRD. I have been there since I graduated college, so over 20 years, which is pretty rare nowadays, but I have enjoyed working there and just always stuck there, for better or worse. I've had several different jobs and opportunities within R.R. Donnelley. When I actually started, I worked for a company called Wallace, and we went through several different names and mergers and acquisitions. And throughout the kind of course of my career, I started by doing web designing, and then kind of learned web development on the job and through some training that the company offered me. I was then promoted to be a team leader of that group and eventually a manager. I will say I was a very young and inexperienced manager when I first started, and so that was kind of an interesting turn in my career. Something looking back, I probably wished I would have had a little bit more time to just be a doer before I was a manager, but that kind of is what it is. I have been asked to manage a lot of different projects with a lot of different expertise. Throughout my career, I outsourced an EDI group, I did a mainframe retirement project, and I bring that up not because of those specific technologies, but to tell you that I've learned there are a lot of different technologies out there, and you might look at job postings or look at careers and think, well, I don't have that specific experience, but I have learned through the years that a lot of systems and technologies and programmings are very similar. Even a mainframe from a Microsoft programming language, you just have to apply some different skill sets that you can take the skills that you have and often apply them to the new technology. What I found and what I think I'm good at is quickly assessing and managing situations and people and projects. And I think that to a company can be more meaningful at times in my position than necessarily being the best XYZ programmer. I think that's an important skill to have, but it is not always the most important thing. That eventually led me to becoming the Senior Director of Customer-Facing Solutions at Donnelley. So a little bit about Donnelley. It's a pretty big organization. We have been in business for over 155 years. We have facilities in over 29 countries, 250 plus locations, 50,000 clients, and about 36,000 employees. We do trade on the New York Stock Exchange, and we empower brands to activate marketing and communication resources for maximum returns. That's kind of our slogan or tagline. At the end of the day, our core business is we are a printer. So a lot of mail that you get, Donnelley probably printed. A lot of labels that you see on packaging, Donnelley probably printed. At the end, a lot of signs that you see in retail stores, we probably printed. So while you probably don't recognize the name R.R. Donnelley or the brand R.R. Donnelley, you probably run across a good 10 or 15 products that Donnelley produced every day. You just don't know it. What I do specifically at Donnelly is I support two different products. I support what is called our Pivot product. And essentially what that does is it's a product that our customers can either white label to look like their business, or they can access via APIs, web services, to enable e-delivery for their end consumers. So essentially we develop a product that allows you to get things like your cable bill, your cell phone bill. I don't know if any of you have those bills yet, but eventually you will, electronically through email or text instead of through the physical mail. So we really enable that electronic delivery of those products. And we also do it for compliance needs. We have a lot of customers who are regulated by the government and have different requirements to store documents different ways for different amounts of times with different security, and we enable that for them. I also support a product for our retail business, so stores like Target, Ulta, Panera Bread, and it's a product that allows customers to place orders for store signage. So we keep configurations of all the different stores so that when a company like Panera wants to roll out signs to talk about the fact that they are now closed, but they offer pickup, curbside pickup, they could go in and place that order, and we would know all the configurations of their stores, the window sizes, how many windows that they have, so we could roll out those orders. All that's fine and good. I would say at the end of the day, really what I do is solve problems. That's a huge part of my job, a huge part of, I think, any job, and an important component. So a little bit about my personal life. I've been married for 17 years. It will be 18 on Monday. I have two kids, ages 13 and 11. I live here in Mequon. I would say my hobbies include my family, yoga, reading, although I really prefer audio reading. I don't know if that's called reading or whatever. Podcasts, and I enjoy cooking. So just a little bit about me. So you had asked me to give advice to my 20-year-old self. And so I came up with 10 tips, although each tip has several bullet points. So, but I did get it into a list of 10. So let's start here. Number 10, not everyone is like you, and that's okay. You know, when you start working, you're going to be suddenly thrust into an environment where you have people of many different ages, of many different backgrounds, of many different levels of experience. And the key, I think, is to really figure out how people work, not to convince everyone to be and work like you. I think that's important. It can be kind of human nature to think everyone needs to work like you. You might not notice it, but throughout a lot of your life, you've probably been surrounded with more people like you than you might think. And so try to figure out how to work with other people, because they're not going to all be like you. You're going to be exposed to a variety of people in your career. Learn from them, learn how to work with them, not against them. You're going to have some managers and coworkers you love to work for, and others you don't. Focus on the work and not the personalities, I think, is really important. It can be easy to get hung up on not enjoying people's personalities that you don't enjoy working with, or especially working for. But if you focus on the work, I think sometimes that people you would otherwise not get along with might be coworkers that you really end up enjoying to work with, and you can learn a lot from them. And I put this next one because it is really something I would tell myself. Not that I wouldn't tell all these things to myself, but you can learn a lot from a boss you don't like. I had a boss once. I've had several bosses, but one I can specifically remember, and we had clashing personalities. He did not solve problems the same way I solved problems. He did not look at things the same way I looked at things. I found him very frustrating to work for. I really considered leaving. And in the end, you don't work for people forever. It does pass. And I did learn a lot in working for him. I'm not sure I would have done it for much longer than I did, but try to learn from other people instead of being irritated by them is sort of my gist. And pick your battles. It's important to, it's easy to want to fight everything, but it's not worth it. So pick the right battles. Number 9, there is more than one way to solve a problem. I think this is such a huge, huge message, especially when it comes to programming environments. I love this saying, technology is as much an art as it is a science. There are, leading a group of developers is often a bit like convincing everyone to follow the same religion. You know, there are lots of different ways to solve problems. There are lots of different ways to program things. And when you're working on a team and you're working together, half the battle is just philosophically getting on the same path of how you're going to develop something. And I think it can be easy to get caught up in a single way of thinking. I've seen developers do it, and it can really stunt your career. You might have a really good idea and a really good way to approach programmatically solving a problem, but you have to kind of look at you have to take the direction the group is going, or, you know, it doesn't mean you can't state your way, but don't be so stubborn in your way that you miss trying something different. So just don't get caught up in one way of thinking. And I would say listening to others is so critical. It's not a failure, and it can be really hard to do. We get caught up in our own ideas. We tend to think our own ideas are good ideas, and they probably are, but there are, like I said, there are lots of different ways to solve a problem. And if you get a team solving a problem 5 different ways, you're not going to get a good solution. Don't take it personally. It's not personal. So you're going to have to do a lot of problem solving, especially tackling programming assignments, projects, applications. And, you know, if you can focus on the work at hand and try to not take it personally, I think it will help move you forward more successfully. And this is also a big one. Don't let your ego get in the way. Again, it's easy to want to be right. It's easy to think you have the best solution. But pick your battles. Remember I said that earlier, and don't let your ego get in the way. Try something new. You know, yeah, don't let your ego get in the way. I'll end it there. Number 8, this is a statement my husband says to me often. They pay you because work is hard. And I just say that because I think sometimes we have these idealistic views that work is like all roses and flowers and high-fiving, and it is a lot of that, but it should be fun, but it is hard. It's hard work. It's especially hard in the beginning. And so keep that in mind. Persevere. A no might feel like rejection, but can be a blessing in disguise. Learn from no just as much as yes. So try to learn from those experiences rather than kind of getting too caught up in not getting your way. There is rarely an easy button, and rewards come with hard work. Some decisions you will be asked to make in your career just suck. I didn't have a better, more elegant way to put that, but I just want to say, you know, sometimes things we have to do, there are so many good things and exciting things and things I'm proud of that I've accomplished in my career, but I just put this on here because I want you to know there are moments that work is really hard. Decisions are tough, and you can get through them and get past them, and just be prepared that they will happen. Number 7, a degree is great, but experience matters. Like I said, I was a young manager, or asked to be a manager at a young age. And so I didn't have that experience. And I would say looking back, I would have probably leaned on people with that experience more than I did. It's easy to think because you've been given a position, you know how to do it, but it's important to lean on other people. So I put it's easy to think we know what is best. That is our human nature. Theoretical knowledge is not enough. Understand the real world problems you are solving. And so very often I see developers who are very good and know how to code. They know how to, you know, X and Y, A and B. I probably don't have a good programming analogy handy, but try to understand why you're doing what you're doing, not just do it. You know, what's the problem I'm solving? What's the use case? What's the acceptance criteria? Ask those questions, and if you don't understand the answers, ask them again, because just adding validation to add validation isn't good enough. You need to understand why you're adding it. You need to understand why you're doing it. And I think that's really important and can help move you forward. Listen to people who've been doing this longer than you. You don't have to agree with them, but I think their insight is important and worth listening to. Take opportunities that can give you experience, even if they don't come with a title or more money. Take chances, take opportunities that I think those things can lead to a title, can lead to more money, but you don't want to miss out on them unnecessarily for a title or money. You don't want to be taken advantage of, so there's a fine line. But I think that there's definitely plenty of opportunities to raise your hand, say, oh, I'll do that, I'll take that. Be the person that does that, and I think it will be recognized. Promotions are not everything. They're an important step, but not the only way to move your career forward. It can be really easy to think, okay, I'm going to start as a developer 1, and within 2 years, I want to be a developer 2, and then I want to be this, and then I want to be that. And you need to set goals for yourself, but don't just want a promotion because it's been so many years and you want a promotion. There are other ways to set goals. There's other ways to have career advancement. So promotions are important, but they are not everything. Number 6, don't underestimate yourself. Dare to think big. You can be, I know this is cliche, something you hear as a kid, you can be anything you want to be, but you can. You can be anything you want to be. You can think big, and big doesn't necessarily have to mean you have a powerful C-level position at an organization. It just means, what do you want to contribute? How do you want to be successful? So think big, and you can accomplish it. Don't confuse power with success. Power is not everything. If you want to climb the corporate ladder and become an executive, that is a perfectly fine goal, but there are plenty of ways to be successful, both financially and from a career perspective without doing that. And so that doesn't have to be everybody's path. Dare to follow something you're passionate about, as I would say, especially when you're young. If there's a certain industry you're passionate about, try to follow it, try to pursue it. If you can be a part of an organization that you are also passionate about, I think that that's aspirational. I would say I'm not necessarily passionate about printing. So if I looked back and was to tell my 20-year-old self that, I might have taken that into consideration a little bit more, but here I am. And so it's something I would look back and maybe consider differently. Set goals. I know I just said this one. Don't always make them about titles and promotion. And be okay if your goals change. So maybe you can set goals 1 through 10, but be willing to adjust along the way. Okay? Continuously challenge yourself, but at the same time, be happy for what you've accomplished. Take some, sometimes we're always so fixated on what's next, where am I going next, what am I going to do next. Sometimes it's good to just enjoy what you have, what you have accomplished, what you are doing, and learning from it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Set goals for yourself and not to prove yourself to anyone. So kind of really ask yourself where you want to be, what you want to do, especially from a technology and development perspective. Do you want to stay into coding? Do you want to be a developer? That is a much different career path than do you want to be a manager? I haven't written a line of code in 10 years. So I went down a management path and I help guide developers and guide programmers, and that's different. But there are some people who want to stay into technology, want to stay into development, and that's a good career path too. So you don't have to decide out of the gate, but set some goals for yourself and do them for you. And then it's okay to change your mind. Stay curious. Never stop learning about your role, the company you work for, how things work, how they could be better. Curious people innovate. Again, don't just do A, do B, do C, ask why you're doing A, ask why you're doing B, ask why you need to do C. Understand it and offer ideas. I think that that's being curious and asking questions is a huge contributor to success. And it stands out to people you work with. Don't resist change. I'm here to tell you things will continue to change in your career, in your job, who you work for, the direction, the assignment you got yesterday. So be prepared for change every day. You won't get handed all the answers, all the training. Seek out the information. Learn to do your job better than you are being trained or asked to. So don't just do what they're asking you to do. Seek out information, ask questions, find training, go online, pursue things. Be better than what they're training you to be. I think it will, again, make you stand out and hopefully help you enjoy your job more. Don't fear failure. You know what? Don't be afraid to fail. You will fail. You will make mistakes. I think the key is really to learn from them and recognize when you've made them. I've made a number of them. If you don't recognize them and you make excuses for them, you're likely to repeat them. So be prepared to fail, take chances, recognize when you've made a mistake, and learn from it. And find time for hobbies and things that make you happy. Don't get so hung up in your career that you lose sight of that. Early on in my career, I would say I was working pretty intense hours, pretty hard. Since I did not have a programming degree, I think trying to keep up with people that did, I put a lot of extra time on myself. And looking back, I wish I had taken a little bit more time at that point in my life for hobbies and careers and wasn't working such long hours. And technology is so much fun. I mean, it is just, you are in the most awesome field. Now, when I started back in 2000, it was pretty awesome because we were really, launching one of the first websites and putting forms out there for people and, just doing things that had never, forms is a terrible example. Developing applications out there for people who had just never had anything like that. But technology is constantly changing, constantly evolving. There is always something fun and new and innovative. And it's a really awesome field to be a part of. And so kudos to that. Number 4, offer ideas, make decisions, but don't be too impulsive. So be someone that has the idea how to solve a problem, not the reason why it can't be done. I was just in a meeting this afternoon, and sometimes there's the person who can always tell you why something won't work that way and how it's not going to work. And really, you want to be the part of the solution, even if it's not a perfect solution, instead of the person that's always knocking down the why that won't work. So really be a problem solver. Like I said, that's a huge part of my job. No matter what technology I'm working on, I'm solving problems, and really that's how we move forward. It's okay to change your mind or make a decision, but don't do it out of impulse or emotion. Take a minute, reflect, take a walk, go home, have a good night's sleep. I think it's easy, especially early on in your career and even now, to want to be emotional about decisions instead of, I would say, non-emotional about decisions. So when you want to make a decision, it's good to just take a few moments or a few days, and don't be impulsive or emotional. I'll just leave it at that. You will be wrong sometimes, and that's okay. Be glad you tried and humble to recognize your mistakes. I know that's a little bit repetitive to the previous one about failure, but I think it's a really important point to recognize your mistakes, be humble about them, and move forward. Avoid making big decisions too quickly. Yes, I know that's very similar to don't be impulsive with your decisions, but again, an important point that bears repeating. Ask yourself what you will do with your decision or answer and have a reason you want to do something versus an emotion. Very often you might say, well, I'm going to go ask this person ABC. So that's all fine and good, but ask yourself, why do you want to ask that person ABC? What are you going to do with the answer? And if you don't have something you want to do with the answer, you just want to ask the question to ask the question, to stir an emotion, to stir a response, it's not worth asking. You just need to move on. So if you don't have a reason or something you're going to do with the information, you're doing it for an emotional reason and not a logical one. Follow your gut. I think it will serve you well, but take a deep breath before you do it. Number 3, find people to connect with. Find people you can connect with and learn from them. Learn from them, learn from them. Ask questions and then ask more questions and then ask more questions. I had, when I first started with Wallace, we were a smaller company. And throughout my career, I've been mentored by someone who's now our CIO. And he's someone that I feel like I can go to with questions. And I don't say that like, oh, he's a CIO, so he's so important. He's someone that thinks like me. We can brainstorm, we can problem solve. And I think that it's really important to find people like that you can connect with at all different levels. People above you, people who are at the same level with you, people who are below you, people who work for different organizations. Seek out a variety of people, and don't just seek out people who are just like you. Seek out people who are different than you. You want to have a network of people with your career that you can go to, ask questions to, get ideas from. Building the right relationships has been a key to my success. I would say being a problem solver and building relationships is 2 huge keys to my success. I think that people pay a lot of attention to relationships and people they know they can go to, people they know they can ask questions to, get advice from. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of building good relationships. Building relationships is not the same as being a brown noser or a people pleaser. And I wanted to put that in there because you're not building relationships if you're just following someone around, always offering to do something, always trying to get on their good side. They need to be genuine relationships. And social capital is key. That goes along the same theme of building relationships. Who in an organization, independent of the org chart, and how you've built relationships with those people goes a long way. And last but not least, don't burn bridges. Again, with that, don't be impulsive with decisions. You might work for someone you totally dislike working for, and one day they're not your boss anymore, and you might say, oh, now is the moment I can unleash on them. I don't work for them anymore. But you know what? It is a small world, and you never know when you might come past that person again, or past that person's sister, cousin, best friend, college roommate. It's a small world, and it's not worth burning bridges, so I would avoid it. Never give up. All the things you think you can't do, well, you can. You can be successful in spite of the perfect degree, the perfect set of experience, the perfect skills. I think just if you want to do it and you have enough grit and desire to accomplish it, you can make it happen. It won't happen overnight, but it can happen. Accept your failures gracefully and don't let them be a mental block. In fact, use them as a learning experience. It's hard to fail. It can be frustrating. And I think sometimes we can get stuck. Try to get unstuck from it. Nothing beats hard work. I'm here to tell you, it's hard work sometimes, and it's long hours, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a hobby, you shouldn't break away, but I'll tell you, nothing beats hard work. Your willpower is one of the few things in life you can control. When in doubt, motivate yourself to keep going. So you have the willpower to push forward, do what you want to do, be successful what you want to be successful at. So use it and move forward with it. You don't have to love your job every day to love your job. So some days you'll probably love it. I would say it'd probably be good to have a job you love more days than you don't love. But a bad day is not a reason to leave a job, even a bad week. So just be prepared that you'll have some good days and you'll have some bad days, but you can move forward. And again, don't be impulsive. If you decide you want to leave, your position, your company, that's okay, but don't do it because you had one bad day. Okay, I was gonna play a TED Talk. I'm probably not gonna play the second one. We'll see. I hope this works. If it doesn't, let me know. I think it's a really good and relevant to our discussion here, and so.
When I was in my 20s, I saw my very first psychotherapy client. I was a PhD student in clinical psychology at Berkeley. She was a 26-year-old woman named Alex. Now, Alex walked into her first session wearing jeans and a big slouchy top, and she dropped onto the couch in my office and kicked off her flats and told me she was there to talk about guy problems. Now, when I heard this, I was so relieved. My classmate got an arsonist for her first client. And I got a 20-something who wanted to talk about boys. This I thought I could handle, but I didn't handle it. With the funny stories that Alex would bring to session, it was easy for me just to nod my head while we kicked the can down the road. 30's the new 20, Alex would say. And as far as I could tell, she was right. Work happened later, marriage happened later, kids happened later, even death happened later. 20-somethings like Alex and I had nothing but time. But before long, my supervisor pushed me to push Alex about her love life. I pushed back. I said, sure, she's dating down. She's sleeping with a knucklehead. But it's not like she's going to marry the guy. And then my supervisor said, not yet, but she might marry the next one. Besides, the best time to work on Alex's marriage is before she has one. That's what psychologists call an aha moment. That was the moment I realized 30's not the new 20. Yes, people settle down later than they used to, but that didn't make Alex's 20s a developmental downtime. That made Alex's 20s a developmental sweet spot, and we were sitting there blowing it. That was when I realized that this sort of benign neglect was a real problem, and it had real consequences, not just for Alex and her love life, but for the careers and the families and the futures of 20-somethings everywhere. There are 50 million 20-somethings in the United States right now. We're talking about 15% of the population, or 100% if you consider that no one's getting through adulthood without going through their 20s first. Raise your hand if you're in your 20s. I really want to see some 20-somethings here. Yay, y'all's awesome. If you work with 20-somethings, you love a 20-something, you're losing sleep over 20-somethings, I want to see, okay, awesome, 20-somethings really matter. So I specialize in 20-somethings because I believe that every single one of those 50 million 20-somethings deserves to know what psychologists, sociologists, neurologists, and fertility specialists already know. That claiming your 20s is one of the simplest yet most transformative things you can do for work, for love, for your happiness, maybe even for the world. This is not my opinion. These are the facts. We know that 80% of life's most defining moments take place by age 35. That means that 8 out of 10 of the decisions and experiences and aha moments that make your life what it is will have happened by your mid-30s. People who are over 40, don't panic. This crowd is going to be fine, I think. We know that the first 10 years of a career has an exponential impact on how much money you're going to earn. We know that more than half of Americans are married or are living with or dating their future partner by 30. We know that the brain caps off its second and last growth spurt in your 20s as it rewires itself for adulthood, which means that whatever it is you want to change about yourself, now is the time to change it. We know that personality changes more during your 20s than at any other time in life. And we know that female fertility peaks at age 28, and things get tricky after age 35. So your 20s are the time to educate yourself about your body and your options. So when we think about child development, we all know that the first 5 years are a critical period for language and attachment in the brain. It's a time when your ordinary day-to-day life has an inordinate impact on who you will become. But what we hear less about is that there's such a thing as adult development, and our 20s are that critical period of adult development. But this isn't what 20-somethings are hearing. Newspapers talk about the changing timetable of adulthood. Researchers call the 20s an extended adolescence. Journalists coined silly nicknames for 20-somethings like twixters and cadults. It's true. As a culture, we have trivialized what is actually the defining decade of adulthood. Leonard Bernstein said that to achieve great things, you need a plan and not quite enough time. Isn't that true? So what do you think happens when you pat a 20-something on the head and you say you have 10 extra years to start your life? Nothing happens. You have robbed that person of his urgency and ambition, and absolutely nothing happens. And then every day, smart, interesting 20-somethings like you or like your sons and daughters come into my office and say things like this. I know my boyfriend's no good for me, but this relationship doesn't count. I'm just killing time. Or they say, everybody says as long as I get started on a career by the time I'm 30, I'll be fine. But then it starts to sound like this. My 20s are almost over and I have nothing to show for myself. I had a better resume the day after I graduated from college. And then it starts to sound like this. Dating in my 20s was like musical chairs. Everybody was running around and having fun. But then sometime around 30, it was like the music turned off and everybody started sitting down. I didn't want to be the only one left standing up, so sometimes I think I married my husband because he was the closest chair to me at 30. Where are the 20-somethings here? Do not do that. Okay, now that sounds a little flip, but make no mistake, the stakes are very high. When a lot has been pushed to your 30s, there is enormous 30-something pressure to jumpstart a career, pick a city, partner up, and have 2 or 3 kids in a much shorter period of time. Many of these things are incompatible, and as research is just starting to show, simply harder and more stressful to do all at once in our 30s. The post-millennial midlife crisis isn't buying a red sports car. It's realizing you can't have that career you now want. It's realizing you can't have that child you now want, or you can't give your child a sibling. Too many 30-somethings and 40-somethings look at themselves and at me sitting across the room and say about their 20s, what was I doing? What was I thinking? I want to change what 20-somethings are doing and thinking. Here's a story about how that can go. It's a story about a woman named Emma. At 25, Emma came to my office because she was, in her words, having an identity crisis. She said she thought she might like to work in art or entertainment, but she hadn't decided yet, so she'd spent the last few years waiting tables instead. Because it was cheaper, she lived with a boyfriend who displayed his temper more than his ambition. And as hard as her 20s were, her early life had been even harder. She often cried in our sessions, but then would collect herself by saying, you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends. Well, one day Emma comes in and she hangs her head in her lap and she sobbed for most of the hour. She'd just bought a new address book and she'd spent the morning filling in her many contacts, but then she'd been left staring at that empty blank that comes after the words, in case of emergency, please call. She was nearly hysterical when she looked at me and said, who's going to be there for me if I get in a car wreck? Who's going to take care of me if I have cancer? Now, in that moment, it took everything I had not to say, I will. But what Emma needed wasn't some therapist who really, really cared. Emma needed a better life, and I knew this was her chance. I had learned too much since I first worked with Alex to just sit there while Emma's defining decade went parading by. So over the next weeks and months, I told Emma 3 things that every 20-something, male or female, deserves to hear. First, I told Emma to forget about having an identity crisis and get some identity capital. By get identity capital, I mean do something that adds value to who you are. Do something that's an investment in who you might want to be next. I didn't know the future of Emma's career, and no one knows the future of work, but I do know this: identity capital begets identity capital. So now is the time for that cross-country job, that internship, that startup you want to try. I'm not discounting 20-something exploration here, but I am discounting exploration that's not supposed to count. Which, by the way, is not exploration, that's procrastination. I told Emma to explore work and make it count. Second, I told Emma that the urban tribe is overrated. Best friends are great for giving rides to the airport, but 20-somethings who huddle together with like-minded peers limit who they know, what they know, how they think, how they speak, and where they work. That new piece of capital, that new person to date, almost always comes from outside the inner circle. New things come from what are called our weak ties, our friends of friends of friends. So yes, half of 20-somethings are or underemployed, but half aren't, and weak ties are how you get yourself into that group. Half of new jobs are never posted, so reaching out to your neighbor's boss is how you get that unposted job. It's not cheating, it's the science of how information spreads. Last but not least, Emma believed that you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends. Now, this was true for her growing up, but as a 20-something, soon Emma would pick her family when she partnered with someone and created a family of her own. I told Emma the time to start picking your family is now. Now, you may be thinking that 30 is actually a better time to settle down than 20 or even 25, and I agree with you. But grabbing whoever you're living with or sleeping with when everyone on Facebook starts walking down the aisle is not progress. The best time to work on your marriage is before you have one, and that means being as intentional with love as you are with work. Picking your family is about consciously choosing who and what you want, rather than just making it work or killing time with whoever happens to be choosing you. So what happened to Emma? Well, we went through that address book, and she found an old roommate's cousin who worked at an art museum in another state. That weak tie helped her get a job there. That job offer gave her the reason to leave that live-in boyfriend. Now, 5 years later, she's a special events planner for museums. She's married to a man she mindfully chose. She loves her new career. She loves her new family. And she sent me a card that said, "Now the emergency contact blanks don't seem big enough." Now, Emma's story made that sound easy, but that's what I love about working with 20-somethings. They are so easy to help. 20-somethings are like airplanes just leaving LAX, bound for somewhere west. Right after takeoff, a slight change in course is the difference between landing in Alaska or Fiji. Likewise, at 21 or 25 or even 29, one good conversation, one good break, one good TED Talk can have an enormous effect across years and even generations to come. So here's an idea worth spreading to every 20-something you know. It's as simple as what I learned to say to Alex. It's what I now have the privilege of saying to 20-somethings like Emma every single day. 30 is not the new 20, so claim your adulthood, get some identity capital. Use your weak ties. Pick your family. Don't be defined by what you didn't know or didn't do. You're deciding your life right now. Thank you.
All right. Hang on one sec. There we go. I liked that TED Talk. I know some parts of it were irrelevant and a little bit off topic in terms of family, and I recognize not all of you are in your 20s necessarily, but you're all at university and looking to advance your career and move forward. And I think that she makes a really important and relevant point that you are at an opportune time to do that with this education, to move forward, build capital, identity capital, weak ties, ask other people about job openings, build relationships, and move forward rather than kind of stirring and saying, well, maybe I know I got this degree, but I might do something with it next year or the year after that. It's a great time to move forward and be successful and try something. And if that doesn't work, try something else, but try it to make progress, not just kill time. So I love TED Talks. I think that they are, a great way to take 10 minutes and really get some insight and ideas from someone else in all kinds of fields. There's a lot of great podcasts, or you can go online. I know you guys know how to access TED Talks. But of course, I Googled, TED Talks and advice for college graduates. I recognize some of you are first semester students and some of you are graduate students. So you're at all different levels, but I thought these tidbits of advice were good, and the names might give you some ideas of other TED Talks you want to look up. So my number one piece is you're in the driver's seat. You are now in control of your career, your decisions, your education, and your success. And so that's pretty exciting. And advice from TED speakers is, if you don't know what you want to do with the rest of your life, you aren't a failure. Totally agree. Sometimes I wonder what I want to do with the rest of my life. So it's okay to constantly question yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. We're all not Oprah, where we got this moment that we're doing the right thing in our life. Find the thing that makes you want to know what you're talking about. So I might not be passionate about printing per se, but I do enjoy working for Donnelly. I enjoy the people. I want to learn more about it. I enjoy talking to customers every day. And I think that you want to find something that makes you want to know what you're talking about. Give yourself time. It's going to take time to find and build your dream career. You're not going to walk into it overnight. So give it some time. When you get a job and start working, don't forget to live. I think that's an important and relevant piece of advice. Whenever possible, get as uncomfortable as possible. As you start your career or later on in your career, you might do things that you're not comfortable with, and sometimes that uncomfort is where we learn. And taking challenges is probably a better word I like than comfort, but I didn't want to misquote her. And surround yourself with people who help you be the best versions of yourself. Again, with building relationships, find people who make you want to be a better person. And at that, I tried to put it to kind of 5 final thoughts. I was going to call them final words, but a couple of them were more than one word. Be a problem solver, be a good listener, be curious, be humble, and be amazing. And I definitely did not take 2 hours. So I will pause there. That's what I have, and see if there are any questions or comments or.
All right, any questions for Tricia? No, that was perfect timing. That's pretty common, and then hopefully there's some conversation, but yeah, I thought that was really informative. So questions for Tricia?
What's a project you're working on right now at work that's really exciting?
One thing that we've been doing that's kind of interesting is and relevant with all of the quarantine. So the retail application that we have, we've had to suddenly stop orders from shipping. So Ulta is one of our customers, and all their stores closed rather suddenly. So we had to work and figure out how we could basically remove, allow them to still place orders, but not have those orders ship. So that's been kind of interesting, along with a number of COVID-19 emails, communications. I'm sure your inboxes you're probably tired of everyone giving you their spin on COVID-19, but a lot of communications with our clients in that regard.
Well, this was a question that came in to me during it. I won't identify the person, but what would you say to somebody who, wants to follow their passion, but has some concerns about whether it would financially support them?
I would say probably early on in your career is maybe a little bit easier time to pursue that than later on in your career. And you could probably debate that either way. It'd be easy to think, well, I'm going to get just kind of the safe job first and make a little money. And then once I have some savings, I can take that chance. But I feel like if you aren't hungry and kind of desperate, I don't know if you would take the same chance. So I would say to do it when you're young, because once you start to kind of get in this rhythm of a nice paycheck and a nice job, you might not follow your passion.
This is less of a question, more of a I guess comment. I guess that's right. I really appreciate you sharing that TED Talk video. Sometimes when I'm like feeling productive, I'll pull up a TED Talk and just kind of see what I'll get to learn something new. And it's cool to see people talk about like looking like we as 20-year-olds are looking at this like, oh yeah, they're just saying that, but these are actual people that have lived through this, and they're like saying, guys, you need to stop slacking off, actually focus. And I don't know, I just find that cool.
Yeah, there's a really great podcast I love called TED Radio Hour is what it's called. And what's great about it is they interview about 5 different TED speakers in that podcast. So it gives you kind of a great opportunity to capture 5 or 6 different TED Talks within the span of one podcast. And then if any of those interest you, you can go back and listen to the full TED Talk. But I do think it's a very relevant comment. There's so much you can accomplish in your 20s, so many chances you can take, so many careers you can pursue, so many things that you can do. As much as you can take advantage of that, I think it will pay off.
So you mentioned that we should take opportunities that grant experience and also encourage us to follow stuff we're passionate about. So how do kind of foot in the door positions really fit into this? Like, a position that maybe you're not the most passionate about, but it at least gets you something so you can reach that thing you're passionate about.
I think if you can't find a company you're overly passionate about, let's just say I'm passionate about being green and I want to go work for a company that's all about environment, right? Let's say I can't do that. Well, maybe one thing I find you can always do, I don't know if this is a stretch of an analogy, you can always find people you enjoy working with. I would say if you kind of take the facade of I work for a financial institution or a lawyer or a printing company, I think what's good to look at and kind of get your foot in the door is, do I enjoy the people I'm working with every day? Because I think that will help get you that experience and build those relationships. If you can't start in the industry you want, I don't know if I answered your question very well as I'm sitting here answering that. In terms of taking chances and getting your foot in the door, I do also think some of that is just your gut feel and the level of risk you're comfortable with. You know what I mean? It's a bit of a decision. I'll say maybe I went down that safe path of I got a job with a Fortune 500 company. I worked there for 20 years. I don't necessarily see myself as that entrepreneurial risk taker. So I don't feel like I have a lot of good insight or advice on how to take those risks. But I think at the age I'm at now and at the point in my career I'm at now, I think it would be harder to do now than when I was young. I still think I'm pretty young.
Yeah, I think just to kind of tack onto that, I think that's very true. I mean, a lot of you know I'm very much an entrepreneur, and I started when I was very young, starting my own businesses and things like that. And you know, I tell students to stay poor for as long as you can, which I think is kind of in you know, in line with you know, her message about kind of focusing on your 20s. You know, when I was 18 or 19 or 20, I had nothing to lose. You know, and so I could take all these risks. I had all the energy in the world, and you know, really just kind of went out there and followed, you know, what I was passionate about or followed my ideas. Well, you know, now I'm, you know, married for a couple minutes longer than Tricia's been, and you know, you got all these bills and you got other things going on. You don't have the energy, so all these things that I'm so happy I did when I was in my 20s. That if I hadn't done those and I kind of focused on not following my passion, not following those things, I think I would look back now and kind of regret it, because I'm not sure that I feel like I would have the energy or the desire or be in the position to go and take some of those risks now. So kind of, you can go back and recapture your 20s. That would be a pretty exciting thing, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Tricia, can you speak a little bit more on being a young manager and what some of your challenges and positives, I guess, you've had with that experience?
Well, I would say some of the positives that I've had is almost my lack of experience led me to take risks, and my lack of experience led me to take risks. So in some ways, because I was young, because I didn't have a lot of experience, I made some impulsive decisions and I took some risks, and I think some of them really panned out and helped move things forward. And some of them I was a little bit humbled by and probably wished I hadn't been as impulsive or emotional. So I think learning to make decisions out of logic and not emotion is something that came in time and I didn't have out of the gate. And I've learned now, but I didn't have then. And I think, I'll be blunt, getting people to respect me when the people that worked for me were older than me, that was a challenge. And I think my advice in that regard is to show them that you are just as willing, set a good example, lead by example, roll your sleeves out, help people out as much as you can is the best way to overcome that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tricia, first of all, thank you for all the tips. They were great. I'm sure a lot of them will help me a lot with my anxiety towards my career. I have a question for you. Would you have any advice for someone that has a very technical background and would like to move the career, you know, a little more towards to a managerial role or something like that? How do you do this move?
I think, you know, you're probably very focused right now, especially at university, on a lot of the technical skills. And I think in management, there's a lot of need for soft skills, personable skills, business skills. I would say if you have a desire to possibly go down a management path, you know, you're going to need a good understanding of some finances. You're going to need a good understanding of how a business works. And you're going to need to be able to work and interact with other people well. You know, having that technical knowledge is a good foundation and it's important, but there's just some basic management skills that I think are relevant in any industry that are important to have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now, Priscilla, I think what I heard Tricia say there is that she really strongly encourages you to do a master's in computer science and not an MBA. Yeah, so Priscilla is doing something a little bit weird. She's doing kind of an MBA with a computer science kind of hodgepodge thing. Her undergrad's in computer science, and she's really interested in data analytics, but also the business world. So she wants to leverage her technology background to be in that management side. So I've been trying to talk her out of that. And now Tricia apparently agrees with me. No, actually, she disagrees with me. She agrees with Patricia. But yeah, I think I figured you would really like this talk, Priscilla, because it's this is really a person that came through that same kind of mentality of going into a management type of position and being around a whole bunch of technical people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that it is difficult to try to point out my career towards this, since I have a very logical thinking, and I think I have all this technical skills, but it's hard to point out and try to make this move. I am totally lost. I don't know where to go.
I mean, education, whether it's the master's in computer science or the MBA, I really and truly believe the key to good managers are people who are willing to solve problems. Learn how to solve a problem. What is the problem? Nobody's going to hand you the solution. Be willing to take the problem, take it on, come up with a solution, drive a team towards that solution. I mean, that's the gist of management, right? Solving problems and getting other people. As you move up into management, you don't get to solve the problem. You have to get a team of people to solve it for you. So your success is dependent on your ability to communicate to a team of people, getting them to work together down the same path towards success. I mean, that to me is the key of management.
Yep. Oh, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Tricia?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Would it be possible for you to post the 2 TED Talks in the...
Yeah. I was just going to say that. I'll email the presentation, and it's got linked to the TED Talks. The other TED Talk, and I didn't want to inundate this with TED Talks, so I picked my favorite and figured I'd send out the link. It's really interesting. It's a gentleman's perspective on success and kind of what success means. And I think it's very insightful, because even though I went down this path of kind of typical success, Fortune 500 company, move up through management, looking back, there are a lot of other ways I could have been successful. I don't know that I wish I would have taken them, but I think they're very important to recognize as you look at a career, because I do run into a lot of people who work for me who think that, well, to be successful, I need to do this, and then I need to do this, and then once I get that, then I'll become a manager, and that is a path to success, but not the only one.
Yeah, and as soon as I get the email from her, I'll distribute it on Slack so everybody has it. And also, I'm recording this, so I'll put up the recording, and I'll send you a link to the recording as well, Tricia.
Perfect.
I have a question.
Sure.
So then, did you know what you want to do when you're 20-something?
No. That's a great question. So when I started college, I really liked design, I will admit. And I started out as a graphic designer. And then I realized that degree was more of an art degree, and I didn't feel like that was a good path for me. So the internet and the web was really coming out. It was new then. And I tried to pursue a path where I could get into technology, still have a foothold in design. And then at a career fair, I ran into this company, Wallace, and they were looking for web designers. And it kind of all just happened. So I did not have this predetermined path, or I didn't even know that I wanted to be a manager. It's a great question, because I think there are a lot of people who spend a lot of time on goals, and I want to be here in 5 years, and I want to be here in 10 years. And I will be the first to tell you, like, I really take it as it comes every day. I am not hung up on titles. I never have been. I have gotten a lot of titles at young ages, but I have never pursued them. I feel like good work is more important than a title.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question kind of related to Priscilla's. I'm also very interested in web design, but I am a computer science major, and I guess kind of like Priscilla, I'm wondering from the other direction, is I'm already in a very technical field and, you know, still want to do that, how would I also kind of move incorporating that kind of art, web design, graphic design side?
I think there's a lot of need for UX and UI experienced people now. That kind of field didn't exist when I started, but if I was starting now, I think that I probably would have gone down a computer science path, and I probably would have looked at UX and UI development. As you look for careers, I would say from a design perspective, I think you will have more options and more paths. It's just my advice. If you look for jobs that are in IT versus jobs that are per se in marketing, I think you'll be able to be technical and be creative at the same time.
Other questions?
I have one question. Okay. Do you want to go?
Yeah, you go, please.
Okay, I have a question. Just early in the slide, you have given some weightage on practical skill than a degree. What do you suggest for the new fresher student, those who are going to get graduation, and they want to become, for example, if they want to become programmer or something else, what would you suggest to them? They should do, they should go straight away for the programming, or they should start some other things, and just hope you understand.
So in other words, should you pursue a master's degree or go straight to a job? Is that kind of what you're asking?
After master degree, after
Okay.
degree, fresher, those who don't have any experience, how they should begin, you know?
Yeah, I think that there's, you can go online and you can apply for jobs, but I think as much as you can, my brain is dead. What's network? Thank you. As much as you can network with other people and meet people who are also in IT and build relationships, I think that can be a good way to get your foot in the door. But I don't know if I'm answering your question very well. I think you have to start somewhere, right? So just, just because you take a job doesn't mean you have to keep it for 20 years like I have, right? So start somewhere. And I think then you can have a baseline to decide if it's what you want or what you don't want. But better to take that than to sit around and think, well, that's not the perfect job or that's not the perfect job. So find something, start somewhere, and then you have a baseline to go from.
Okay.
And then Josh, so just to kind of tack on to that based on some of her earlier slides. So Tricia, Josh is finishing up his master's degree in computer science, and he's kind of indicating that he's learned all this stuff but doesn't have any real world experience yet and wants to know, how do you get into that? Early in her presentation, she mentioned never, never, never discount experience. Don't focus on the titles, don't focus on the pay. Those things are important and good pats on the back and stuff like that. So any opportunity you can get to get experience, whether it's paid or not paid, I think pushes you in the direction of what you're ultimately going to do. And like she just said there, what you do right out of school isn't necessarily what you'll be doing in 25 years. So every little bit of experience you can get that kind of nudges you towards what you love and what you hate kind of is part of how you might spend your 20s to keep the ball rolling.
Yeah. But don't become paralyzed by perfection. You know, start somewhere.
Yes, just for example, right now I'm just working in, I have desire to become a programmer, but I am working in different field right now as well as I'm studying. So do you suggest me, should I find out, I don't know what in the real world, how I'm going to get, what kind of, how much level, what kind of, things I'm going to deal with in real world and when I'm getting a job.
Yeah. I think you need to do something you enjoy doing, whether that's the field you're in, the people you work with. I mean, in a perfect world, we'd all go out and get the exact job that's with our exact degree. And a lot of times that works out and sometimes it doesn't. So I can't say, yes, the minute you graduate, you should absolutely go pursue that field or not. I think you need to just continue to gain experience, continue to chip away at ideas and decide what's the best fit for you.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Sure. I think there was another question.
Yeah, I think Devi had a question.
Yeah, it's me. So my question is like, I want to become a UI UX designer with with a little development knowledge. So should I be focusing on developing? I mean, stressing on developing too, like.
I can speak for my world, and I can't say it's everybody, but I'm seeing more focus and okayness, if you will, with having UI UX developers that focus on the front end, that focus on maybe JavaScript frameworks so you need to know a little bit of coding to develop the front end, HTML style sheets, maybe Angular a little bit, things of that nature, UI frameworks, without getting into needing to be database experts and logic experts. I'm seeing more and more acceptance of that separation, where I think there used to just be like, you were a developer and you kind of did it all. So I don't think I think you can be successful as a UI UX person without all of that developer experience. On the other hand, you know, it can be great to have it. So I think you can be okay either way.
So can I add something to that comments that you just made?
Yeah.
So right now I'm intern at a company called Skygen down in Mequon. And like I talked to a lot of UX designer because like I used to be like an UX intern for them. So one of the things that they told me to kind of like think about is that like as a UX designer, you need to design something that is usable for the user to use. But on the other hand, you kind of need to understand like how the code is working, because you cannot design something that is really abstract to the developers in general. Because if you do something like that, then like it's really hard for them to develop a website that is not realistic. So one of the things that I see some of my UX co-workers do is that they also learn a little bit of like JavaScript, or like how is like the front end code work. So then for that reason, it can help them to like kind of like know what can they design so that the developers know how to develop it, because they need to explain to the developer of like, like how would you do a certain thing? Is it possible or not that the design is gonna be worked out with the code?
Yeah,
I mean,
great. Yep.
that's just that.
I think you need enough knowledge, right? That you get the UI framework that's going to be used. You understand kind of your options. I'll say it's nice to be more technical than Photoshop, but you don't need to be writing code per se. I think it's good to have, there's more of an appreciation for UI UX as a role than as a skill than there used to be.
Other questions? And just to clarify there, V, I think what she said is the only thing worth learning is coding.
I think I did, yeah. And I will say to that, there's nothing better than, knowing how to code. It can take you down a lot of different paths, but it is a skill. It is a honed skill, a technical skill, a needed skill, a highly paid skill, and something you can do. And a lot of these other things, like, you can pick up. You know what I mean? I figured out finances. I never got an accounting degree, but getting a skill to code will serve you well in your career. Absolutely.
But kind of what you were just talking about here with user experience is, I think the expectations in industry with software is that our software keeps looking better and better and better and being more user-centric and easier to use and all these things. So this idea of having an entire role around that element of it, who's somebody who's aware of the technology, of the programming side of it, for instance, that person isn't just an add-on. So like 20 years ago, the coder might have just kind of slapped together a mediocre interface and that was good enough. But now our expectations in society is that, we expect the software to work behind the scenes. It should work. That's the coder's job, is make the logic work. But
Yeah.
if we're going to compare two different products to each other and we're going to pick one or the other, the one that has that's more enjoyable to use, that has the more features, that, all these other things, these are all user experience type of things that, I can at least talk about from my own background. I think a pretty solid programmer, but my user experience type of skills are, mediocre. I can make things look better than I probably should be able to, but in no way could I fill a role in that. So I would need, if I'm writing software in today's world, I would need to have a complementary person who could make my stuff look good and work well, even if I'm writing code that technically works behind the scenes. So that whole idea of it being a role, and probably an increasingly high paying role. You mentioned that coding pays a lot of money, but I think user experience, now that it's being more and more accepted, is probably going to continue to grow in terms of importance. Almost think of it like the chef. You're like a head chef at a restaurant, and it's got to be cooked well, but the presentation is everything, right?
Yep.
The difference between the $10 steak and the $40 steak is the drizzled olive oil or something like that.
Yep. I think that's well said.
All right, other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So Tricia, my name is Vanessa, and I have been a teacher. I was an English teacher for like 8th grade for about 5 or 6 years, and I'm coming into computer science from that background. How would you recommend someone like me who's 29? I was really feeling that TED Talk. Someone like me who's like, I need to keep practicing my technical skills, and obviously I'm going back to school for this in order to learn those things, but over the summer or like in my free time, what strategies would you recommend for someone in my situation?
I think just try to gain some experience. Try to find a way that you can leverage your experience. Even if you're currently a teacher, how can you leverage what you're learning to make what you extend to your students more technical? If you can't find some sort of internship or opportunity where you can practice the coding, I think just the more you can spend time working on it, right? I think the more you will kind of figure out what you get into and what you want to learn more about and what interests you. And again, start somewhere. So, I know you said you were feeling the TED Talk and that you're 29, but you're teaching, like you are working towards figuring out what you want to do, right? So that's good. You don't have to land at the answer by some magical age. I think you just need to be working, towards progress. Progress is progress. And I think that's okay. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question, and it's kind of more personal and what I'm actually feeling recently. Did you ever have times where you feel like you are not in the right field and that you're not sure if you're contributing enough or doing well enough to the point that, that you are in the right field, but at the same time, like there's other days where you are completely enjoying what you're doing. And I guess, do you have any advice for that?
Absolutely. I think I've been with the same company for 20 years, so I definitely have moments that I question if I'm some imposter and I don't really belong in technology because I don't technically have a computer science degree. There are other times that I am very passionate about it and I love what I do. And I think, like I said earlier, you know, there are days that you love your job and there are days that you don't. And I think you have to persevere on the days that you question and the days that you don't love what you're doing or you question what you're studying. It, and if they keep coming up over and over and over and over again, maybe they're worth having a conversation about, right? But if it's just kind of a bad day, a bad week, sometimes you have a bad month, I don't think that's worth being too rash or impulsive about if you're headed down the right path. So yes, I do question what I'm doing all the time. Not all the time, but enough of the time. I mean, it's just human nature to kind of question, am I doing the right thing? Am I contributing at the right level? Could I work for someone else? Could I do something different? And I think my ability to be patient with those decisions, for better or worse, has kept me at Donnelly where I am. Because I often end up thinking, well, the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side. And so don't ask yourself necessarily, am I in the right field, but or am I pursuing the right thing, unless you're also willing to say, well, but what else would I do? And why would that be better? And why would that be different? And then you might come back to that you are doing the right thing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Tricia, my name's Seth, and like Vanessa, I actually came into computer science in my late 20s. Now I'm in my late 30s, so I'm really an outlier compared to all of the rest of the students here. I've been in IT as a DBA for the last 8 or so years, and I was curious. I thought your talk was excellent, especially talking about relationship capital, because that really is true, or rings true to me and my work experience. But what I wanted to ask is, on point number 4, offer ideas, make decisions. Do you ever find that there's a balance with that, where it's like, yeah, we can offer solutions, but if we keep offering solutions, we're going to stretch ourselves beyond the resources of our team?
It's a constant balance. It is. But just because you have solutions doesn't mean they have to be the perfect solution. So I'm constantly kind of balancing my team from solving world peace to figuring out the validation issue we're having. So I think it's important, as you solve a problem, to solve that problem. Sometimes we kind of hypothesize all the ways that problem, in fact, I just had a call about this today. You know, what are we gonna do if this error happens? Are we gonna email someone? Are we gonna text their phone? Are they gonna get that text in the middle of the night? Are they gonna respond to it? Are they gonna tell the client about it? What if it happens all the time? And we kind of got into this hypothesis, and it's like, well, and then I said, but how often does it happen? Once a year. So I think you have to, it is a balance. You don't want to overextend yourself, but I also think sometimes we overthink it and we oversolve it because we're so afraid of that. And so kind of hone into the specific, and I think it's easier to solve the problem.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, anybody have anything else?
Well, thank you so much for everyone's time this evening. I'm sorry we can't meet in person. Maybe another time.
I'll tell you what, an interesting thing is that at least I have found that, I mean, based on the feedback here, this has been maybe one of the more engaging tech talks, and I wonder how much that has to do with it being online and people are kind of comfortable in their surroundings. They pick their nice chair they like at home and stuff like that. I mean, I've definitely seen some positives from doing everything online. Not that there aren't some positives to being able to see people in real life as well, but you know, I think that, you know, technology is going to take us down this blended world And then now it's kind of out of necessity than anything else. But yeah, so if we're back in to the real world next year, we can have you back on campus for a follow-up. Maybe we'll put together a talk where we have a couple of our past tech talks as panelists or something like that, so people could ask questions or something like that.
That'd be great.
All right, so I think that is it. Thanks for coming today, Tricia, and we'll clap
Thanks
here.
for having me.
She'll send me the email with the slides, and I'll get video uploaded and I'll distribute to everybody. But otherwise, we'll call it a day. And I appreciate you being with us today, Tricia.
Absolutely. Have a nice evening, and everyone stay well.
All right, you take care.
Okay,
You
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Having fun waving over there?
Yeah, isn't this great?
What, having 3 fingers?
Well, no, just the whole VR thing. I can play catch with this ball. I don't even know what this is for. Does anybody know?
To be totally honest, when I first joined, I was really confused at what was going on your screen.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what am I seeing? What happened to Dr. Littman?
I mean, I'm attending this entirely in virtual reality. So I'm in this thing called spaces.com that Austin Winkler turned me on to.
I Googled it after I saw that on the screen. Look into it.
I still don't know what this is. What is this? The ball comes back to this. So somehow the ball and this thing are linked. But I can throw the ball and then it comes back and I can, sort of catch it, I guess. But what is this? Because everything else in here, I have dry erase markers. I have things like this. These make sense, and I can throw them, and they just go back to their home, which is, I think, pretty slick. But I don't know what this is. This thing.
Boomerang.
What is that?
Yeah,
part of me wants to think that's in some classrooms they'll have a ball they pass around. I'd be curious to see how Spaces works with more than one person in Spaces.
As of right now, I don't think you can have more than one person in the same space.
Gotcha.
But I mean, the impression I get is it's very much in beta. So the way it works for Zoom is you don't actually link to Zoom. I can show you here. So I have inside here a giant, basically my computer screen. So what I do is I select my camera. I can do my Vive Pro camera, or I can do my Unity cam. So there's a cam inside of the thing for the Unity cam, and that's what I'm holding here. I'm holding this camera that's inside here. So to start Zoom is not actually linked to Spaces at all. I just started Zoom from within Spaces, and because I already had Spaces running, it exposed the Unity camera to Zoom so I could show me in here.
Gotcha.
So it's really easy to set up. I mean, it's just you got to make sure you run the application first. Otherwise, well, I assume that's true. I haven't actually tried starting Zoom first and then logging in with my Spaces, because I assume Zoom picks up what cameras and stuff you have available upon launch.
Yeah, and that's how my face rig stuff works when I turn that on. I have to run the software first, then I boot up Zoom, and then I pick the camera from the list.
But I've been pretty impressed with this. I mean, it's real responsive. And I mean, right now it's just kind of more neat. I'm not sure how functional this dry erase board is, and things like that this exact moment, but this just being kind of a starting point to start dreaming about things you could do in this setting. I think it's kind of neat. But having a keyboard in here would be kind of nice, but typing with 3 fingers might be kind of rough. But even if just being able to tap out stuff on a keyboard just so you have some sort of input. Because like right now, you know, if I want to go onto my computer screen and do something, I don't have any way of giving input. So even if I had a ghetto keyboard in here that allowed me to do something, if need be, I mean, it would be a productivity thing, but maybe just, you know, typing in a web address or something I think would be handy.
Are we still doing the setup for my Oculus Go tonight or no?
Well, we can, but you say you don't have batteries, or did you find a battery?
I did find a battery from like from the remote thing.
Okay. So yeah, we'll do that. What time is it? It is
7:30.
7:30. So let's plan on 9 o'clock. We'll meet in the normal Zoom Zoom room. Any of you who has a Oculus, any sort of Oculus technology, feel free to come as well, and we'll try to get those set up so we could do some Oculus Spaces things. But at least for this, you know, even if you're just on normal Zoom, you'll be fine. So let's set that up at 9 o'clock. Sound good, V?
You know what's like a totally good idea is that you do a class in VR chat.
If I do a class like this, like
in
what
VR,
I'm doing
in VR chat. No, everyone gets in the VR headset and you do the class in VR chat.
Oh, yeah.
Because that'd be great, wouldn't it? You know, we could just run around with, you know.
Sure, and that's
what Knuckles game going on the whole time.
Correct, and that's what I'm kind of trying to do by lending out these VR headsets. I mean, because the challenge with that right now is, you know, only a small percentage of people actually have VR headsets. Because I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true. Same thing as would have been true, you know, 10 years ago. Not that high of a percentage of students had laptops in the classroom. Now, 90% of students have laptops in the classroom. So it's ultimately going to come down to, as more and more people have VR headsets, which I think is going to become more and more common. And, you know, if there's a positive out of this COVID thing, you know, if you go onto Amazon, all the VR headsets are sold out everywhere. You know, I think people are going to be pushed towards virtual reality because their real reality is a prison. Now, hopefully that ends sooner rather than later, but the point is that I think this will get more people using VR. So maybe, you know, a year from now, I'll have 90% of my class who have a VR headset of some kind. Maybe it's not the type that they can play high-end games, but for the social type stuff like VR chat you mentioned, or big screen, you know, these are things that you can do with just an Oculus Go. You don't need a super high-powered gaming rig. I mean, right now I'm in a Vive Pro on my gaming machine, so I'm on a high-end machine, but I walk upstairs, I have my Oculus Go. I also have an Oculus Quest up there. So I have all sorts of different setups, and what I'm doing right now, I could do from any of those. This isn't high performance, you know, frames per second gaming crap. See, I'm going to throw this at Noah's face.
I just wish VR was a little cheaper because of the price it's at right now. It just doesn't seem to make sense to purchase it.
Well, it really, I mean,
like the, you know,
Oculus Go's are $200.
Well, like the computer, like one. So, like, cause, you know, if I want to do that, I want to get one that has like gaming capability, because, you know.
Well, right. So you can
I want to try out Half-Life Alyx, but like I don't want to spend $1,000 on Steam's version of that.
Well, do you already have a decent gaming machine?
Yeah.
I mean, we have Oculus Rifts, older ones that I could sell you for like I don't know, $150.
That was not muted.
So I mean, we have some older technology that's fine. You know, you could play Half-Life Alyx with the original Oculus Rift just fine.
That's a good point.
You know,
like,
and
used is also another good point. I didn't think about that.
Right, and those are fine. So like the headset I'm wearing right now is like $1,000 headset. And the advantage it has over like an original Oculus Rift is the resolution is higher, so text is a little cleaner, and it has higher frame rate, but you still need a computer that can drive it to push that frame rate. If you don't have a crazy graphics card, then you have to downgrade this to something else. And I'm using the same controls as the Valve Index. So the controls are pretty slick, but if there's a second place for controls, it's the Rift controls. So get a used Oculus Rift. Where do you live, Jonathan?
Ann Arbor.
Oh, okay.
area.
Yeah, so that's a pretty far toss for me to throw a
Yeah,
VR
it's-
headset over the pond. But
yeah, I'll just like sometimes I can wait anyway. But it's just right now I can't even get my stuff out of my dorm yet because it's just too far of a trip to justify trying to
no, I
like
get it.
6 hours one way. So it's just like I'm really it's kind of frustrating. I mean, it's nothing the university can really do
Yeah, it is what it is. But
other than like
I
letting
totally
me
get
spend
it.
the night in the dorm room. But that seems kind of out of the option anyway.
Oh, is that the challenge?
It's just that hotels and stuff, and then also if you come out super far away, right? And then all of a sudden, what happens if stuff gets shut down and you're stuck?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I
It's
wouldn't.
like multi-factored there.
If the only thing, is holding you back is hotels, then I would probably, I bet you we could find somebody that would let you crash for the night or something like that. I don't think that'd be a big deal.
Jonathan, if you talk to the RD and explain the situation, they might let, if you need to stay in your dorm for one night, they might let it slide. I live 4.5 hours away. My girlfriend and I were having a similar situation. And
I figured I might just wait and see what happens with the situation. If it gets better, I can just wait. But if it doesn't, I might have to consider trying to do something like that.
Yeah, you might have to make it a 2-day trip. I mean, I'm only 4.5 hours away, so we made it up. 6 hours is kind of cutting it.
That's like a 12-hour round trip, and
especially because you have to go through Chicago and northern Indiana.
And all right, I'm not sure how Chicago's going to, because Chicago's been shut. With Chicago, I don't know how they're going to limit travel either.
Yeah, I don't know what. Because travel's kind of limited. Yeah, because we're.
I don't really want to spend the extra, what's it, 8-9 hours driving to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
No.
Yeah, that would suck.
It's awesome. I
did it once. Awesome. It was pretty part of Michigan. Yeah,
it's amazing.
When I'm traveling, I'd rather avoid the long trip in the middle of nowhere, though.
No, it's not the middle of nowhere, but okay.
It's not, but